Hey, John, how you doing? I haven't seen you in about, what is it, like 4 hours now?
I think somewhere in that region, yeah. Not too bad, though. Got home, enjoying this nice weather. Nice drive to get here today in the back roads.
Yeah, that
Loud
was a lot
music.
a lot of fun today.
That was.
Up at
That
the what was that? There's Yale Elementary School,
Yep.
and we did the career day. Got to talk about podcasting and being a career social media person with all the kids.
That was cool. Learned a lot I didn't know from the kids, even, too. What is it,
Yeah.
that TikTok thing those guys are talking about?
Yeah, it's like a music app where they go
Yeah.
back and forth, and they've got they put up their little videos and
That's cool.
some of those. Because I was surprised to find out how many of those kids are already YouTubers.
Oh, I know.
They're like fifth
That was
graders.
surprising.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I know you mentioned a little bit about the Twitter, too.
Yeah,
You're talking about that, and I think we're on Twitter now, aren't we?
we are. We are on Twitter at Wheelin' Radio. So if our listeners out there are interested in following us, you can go to at Wheelin' Radio to be on Twitter. And you can follow us on there.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange, broadcasting from the Thin Line Off-Road Studio. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
So, of course, you probably know which episode this is, John.
I do.
That's
I mean,
up-
I have my notes in front of me. I
Yeah,
kind of
okay.
cheated. But
episode 8, and we're going to try to cover a lot of stuff today. But what we're going to do for our theme is we're going to talk about 8-lug axles, and more importantly, how to find them cheap in the junkyards and on Craigslist and things like that. Because people, 8-lug axles are about the most popular swap for Jeeps and a lot of the full-size rigs and pretty much anything. But before we do that, we do have some announcements that we want to make about the podcast and, of course, a correction. So the first one that I want to do, we mentioned in episode 7, the CJ7 Jeep episode, where we talked about the Wranglers. I said in the podcast that the Jeep Wrangler YJ, which came out in 1987, was the first vehicle or the first open-top Jeep to receive a overdrive transmission. I'd like to issue a correction on that. The YJ got the first automatic overdrive transmission, but the CJ7 itself actually got the T5 5-speed, which was overdrive. So anybody listening back to our old episodes, we do have a correction there for episode 7. I happened to catch that when I was listening to the podcast after show, of course.
way to go, Keith, making mistakes.
Yeah, we didn't even do our intro this time, did we?
I don't know, did we?
Well, of course,
I don't
we're gonna
think we did.
have the intro roll, but I'm Keith, and sitting across from me is Johnny Orange.
I think that's who I am.
Exactly. So,
go
John,
with it.
you already mentioned our Twitter account. We're on Twitter now, and we also have a Facebook group now. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, we do have that. It's 4x4 Talk, and that's just going to be kind of our space to interact with people more.
Yeah, so that's 4x4 Talk, and that is a closed group on Facebook, and we can interact directly with the listeners. It's also a great place for you to post up pictures of your wheeling trips, post up pictures of whatever you're working on right now, and just go to 4x4 Talk on Facebook and join the group. Find us, join the group, and there'll be direct interaction with John, myself, and a bunch of great people on there. The group's already blowing up just in the week that we've had it on there. We've got, I think, about 80 or 90 people on the group right now, and they have been posting all sorts of awesome pictures, wheeling pictures. There's a couple of Toyota Land Cruiser guys that have posted pictures of trips where their rigs are on their sides, and we also posted up on there post up your old wheeling pics from 10 years plus, and so there's a lot of vintage pictures on there right now. So that was one of the posts we did on there.
I know I've got to catch up on it. I look at it one day, and there's just a few post these pictures. Look at it the next day, and there's 30 some odd posts, I think, in the one.
Yeah.
So I got to play catch up.
Yeah, so go to the 4x4 Talk on Facebook and join the closed Facebook group. And we're also going to do something else for the first time with this episode. What are we going to do, John?
We're doing a giveaway.
We are. So what we're going to give away, Wheelin' decal. It's our logo that you can see on our page there, and we have those made up into decals now. And Thin Line Off-Road, we are going to give away a Thin Line Off-Road t-shirt. We have the blue line, the red line, and the orange line in stock. Those support different types of first responders. We may be out of stock on certain sizes and certain lines, but the winner of this challenge, we will contact, and you can tell us what size t-shirt you have and what you would prefer, and we'll get a hold of you through either messenger or text or something like that. And that's going to be through a bit that we're going to try to do with every episode. We're going to try to do some sort of truck trivia question. We really haven't even settled on a name on this bit yet, have we?
We've tossed a few ideas around. Maybe we should let these guys pick something.
Yeah, there you go.
Some name suggestions. We've thrown a few ideas around. Let's see what you guys think we should call this.
So go to the 4x4 Talk Facebook group and post up if you've got an idea for that. But what we're going to do is sometime during this episode, we are going to throw out a trivia question, and it's going to be related in this episode. It's going to be related to the 8-lug axles that we're talking about. It's not always going to be related to what we're talking about in the episode. It might be something in a previous episode, but we're going to give you an 8-lug trivia question in this and see how knowledgeable you are on old 4x4 axles and see if you can answer it, and we will give you the rules to that when we give you that question. So without further ado, let's roll into talking about 8-lug axles. What do you think, John?
Sounds good to me. You got to roll on something.
Well, exactly. Okay, so like we mentioned, we're going to talk about 8-lug axles on this. And of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know what I mean when I'm talking about an 8-lug axle. And I know that this can get really technical. We're going to try to not get too technical. We're just going to breeze over a few things, and along with a couple of the Keith Codet Thin Line Off-Road secrets. I'm giving away some of my trade secrets during this episode as to how to get a great deal on axles that could otherwise cost you quite a bit of money. And so I'm going to give away a few of those secrets, and we're going to talk about kind of what to look for and what not to look for out there. But, okay, so 8-lug, that means the wheel studs, the number of wheel studs that are holding on the wheels on your axles underneath your vehicle. Most cars today that are on the road, regular cars, are 5-lug. And then a lot of your trucks, your half-ton trucks, are 6-lug. That's pretty common as well, 5 or 6-lug. But when you get into the 1-ton axles or even the 3/4-ton axles, the big things, they are 8-lug. And the actual physical having 8 lugs is not what makes these axles great. It makes they're just beefier all around. That is one thing. There's more clamping force for the wheels, but there is a lot of other things that come with owning 8-lug axles. And talking about 8-lug axles, it's more common to have an 8-lug. Well, the front and rear, you're going to try to swap in both into your Jeep. Let's say you have a Jeep and you want to swap in axles. You're going to swap both front and rear because your Jeep didn't come with 8-lug axles from the factory.
That it did not.
Yeah,
I've been wondering this for a long time, so I'm going to be probably asking you a lot of questions here today, Keith.
Okay, good. I'd like to start probably with the rear axles, and we're just going to do kind of a brief history. Going way back, 8-lug axles kind of came out around the 1950s.
I think we got one of the neighbors there having some fun outside.
We got a big old boat going by or something?
Yeah, speedboat.
Oh, yeah. So the Thin Line Off-Road studio here is right on the St. Clair River, and we get all sorts of awesome speedboats.
Oh, yeah.
You can probably hear that in the background, folks. That's pretty cool. Yeah, you can probably big block Chevy or something in that thing just going along.
Big old race boats.
Yeah, get a lot of those up and down the river, and we'll get those throughout the summer. We're going to be building a studio. That's another announcement. We're going to be building a studio that's more dedicated here right on the premises, probably with some foam walls and things like that. We're trying to work on that over the next couple of months here.
Overall, better audio quality for all you folks listening. So a little bit of new equipment today as well, which is nice. You probably noticed we're a little bit louder. So hopefully that get a little louder, a little more clear for everybody.
Exactly. So back to our 8-lug axles. Talking about the rear axles, in the 1950s, they started to kind of standardize the truck industry, and axles underneath the vehicles all started on the heavier 3/4 and 1 tons started to mostly get 8 lugs. Prior to that, things like your Dodge Power Wagon and some of your NAPCO trucks and some of the earlier conversion trucks might have had large 5-lug patterns, large 6-lug patterns, really quite a variety out there. But the first 8-lug pattern that came out that was common was the 8 on 6.5. That's the bolt spacing. So
I've heard that before.
Yeah, and that's really the most common one even to today, even though there are some different ones now. In the 50s, you got the GM Eaton rear end, and that is the grandfather / predecessor to the 14-bolt axle, which is popular today. And that axle was also used in the NAPCO trucks where they used the center section for the front axle. So it's kind of an honorable mention.
Now, quick question on that note. I've heard this term 14-bolt, 10-bolt, all the time. What does that mean?
That is the number of bolts that hold the ring gear onto the differential assembly inside the housing. Incorrectly, a lot of people refer to those as the number of bolts that hold the differential cover on, but that's not always the case. A lot of axles do have the same number of bolts on the differential cover, say like a GM 12-bolt rear end. But when you're talking about the number of bolts and you're calling it, like you said, a 14-bolt or a 10-bolt axle, that is going to be the number of bolts on the ring gear.
Makes sense.
So the 14-bolt was kind of the first big one that came out GM-wise, and it's still a very, very popular axle today. And they actually make that axle today. They also had, in the 50s, Dana started to come out with some of their axles, such as the Dana 60, the Dana 70 rear axle. And if you know how to count in Dana, the larger the number, the stronger the axle. So there's Dana 25, Dana 27, Dana 44, and they keep jumping up like that.
Can't forget the Dana 30.
A Dana 30,
Come on, man.
Exactly. Well, like I said, we're not going to try to get too technical.
Yeah, it's not really an 8-lug anyways.
No. Well, what I'm saying is we don't want to really get into too much minutia here of like all the different axles right now. We can talk about maybe Dana history in another episode. But so you're looking for a rear axle. Pretty much, if you're going to swap a heavy-duty rear axle into your Jeep or whatever vehicle you're working on, you're going to be looking at an axle that was made somewhere from the late 50s to today. And 8-lug rear axles, with only a couple of real exceptions, are not highly valuable. They're so common because 2-wheel drive, 3/4 and 1 ton trucks used 8-lug axles as well. So your rear axles, you're not talking big money. You can go to a junkyard and you can buy a 8-lug full floater rear axle out of pretty much anything that's not made in, say, the last 10 years because it's still a new wreck part that they're going to charge you a lot of money for. But some old rusty 8-lug axle, you can pretty much pull at any junkyard for $200 or less.
Yeah. Now, real quick, I've heard you mentioned full float there. I've heard that term before, when like full float versus semi-float.
Okay, so yeah, there is 2 different types of rear axle with the 8-lug and actually with a lot of other axles. A full float axle has a separate hub assembly that is bolted to the end of the axle housing, and it operates essentially independently. You don't need to have the axle shafts are not weight bearing. So you can pull the axle shafts out of a full float axle or break them, as we do when we're off-roading, and you can break those, and the axle is going to still go down the trail, whether it's being towed or powered by one wheel or whatever the case is. But you have a safety factor with a full float axle.
That sounds like a nice option.
There are upgrades for non-full float axles, but the other types of axles are called C-clip axles. And
familiar with those.
Yeah, so the axle shafts on those, they are weight bearing to the vehicle. They push into the housing, and then there's a C-clip inside the differential that holds it. So the problem with a C-clip axle, and there's not a lot of C-clip 8-lug axles, but there are a number of them out there. The problem with a C-clip 8-lug rear axle is if you break that axle shaft now and you're on the trail, potentially your wheel can start to travel outside of the body of the vehicle. That actually happened recently. If you saw, our FJ60 Land Cruiser has a
I
C
do
clip.
recall.
Yeah, so that we broke an axle shaft there. I believe we haven't even ripped apart the axle yet. That was from a recent wheeling trip. But the axle or the tire and wheel backed itself out about 8 inches outside the body, and it could keep
geez.
going. So
That's scary.
Exactly. So the benefit is a full float. And so pretty much the axle that you're going to swap, unless you've got need to run a really narrow trail width for some reason, probably 99% plus of people that are swapping rear axles into their rigs, 8-lug rear axles, are going to be swapping a full float rear axle. So that's what we're going to focus on.
Cool.
Is the
Sounds
full
good.
float rear axle. So you got a couple of options there with the full float rear axle. You've got all your Dana options, which are going to be, like I said, your Dana 60, which is going to be your smallest 8-lug rear axle that you can come across commonly. Your Dana 70, your GM 14-bolt rear axle, and then you also have the Ford Sterling axles, the 10.25 and the 10.5 rear end, which means the size of the ring gear.
Okay.
So those are the ones that you're going to run into most commonly for the rear. Now, they all come with their own pros and cons. The Danas probably have the highest aftermarket support. You can buy lockers and gears, if you're going to change the gear ratio in it. The Danas across the board, you can get a lot of different things for. The GM 14 bolt, this is almost a battle between a lot of wheelers, because the GM 14 bolt is so common and parts interchange so commonly, where the Danas have a lot of different widths. The 14 bolts only have a couple different widths. If you are going to buy a GM 14 bolt rear end, you can usually buy those for $50 or $75.
Real.
And they're extremely strong. The 14 bolt does have a few downsides, though. The largest downside of the 14 bolt is it drags down quite a bit on the bottom. It has a lot of bad ground clearance. So the ground clearance would be the amount of space, number of inches from the ground to the bottom of the differential. The 14 bolt, if I remember, it's like 2.5 inches lower. So what people will do, they call it shaving. They cut the bottom of the 14 bolt off and they weld a plate there to make it so it's better for off-road and doesn't get hung up on rocks. So the 14 bolt has a lot of positives. Not only is it cheap, but it has a really strong pinion design where it has its own separate pinion bearing support in it.
Oh, cool.
So try not to get too technical here. We're trying to breeze through some of these pros and cons of these options. Another drawback of swapping a 14-bolt axle is the center section of it. So the center, what they would call the pumpkin a lot of times, is nodular iron, and it doesn't weld like regular cast iron or cast steel that the other axles are. So being nodular iron, if you're going to weld links to it to build like a 4-link rear end or something like that, you now have to use special welding rods, special welding techniques, or build a truss over the top of the axle, which is more common with the 14 bolts if you're not running leaf springs in the back.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the cons of those. Now, the Dana axles, like I said, that's a nodular, that's a cast steel. You can weld right to it.
That's nice.
There's a lot of benefits there. Pinion design's not quite as strong as a 14 bolt. The Dana axles, there's a wide variety of them out there. So you can go online, you can search different axle widths. You figure out which axle you want to run, and you can Google, say, Dana 60 axle widths, and there's plenty of resources out there that you can find them.
Cool.
So why don't we take a little break, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the Ford Sterling rear axle.
Sounds good to me. See you in a bit.
Hey, it sounds like it's time to swap out that old engine for something better, John.
Yeah, man, but I have so much into my trans and transfer case set up already. I don't want to change those too.
Sounds like you need to call Quick Draw Brand Adapters. They specialize in conversion bell housings for nearly all diesel and gasoline engines, including the new 2.8R Cummins.
I like weird engines. I want something different.
Then you definitely need to visit QuickDrawBrand.com today. They have those hard-to-find parts. They also have used diesel engines available. You can call them at 513-446-9654.
Cool, I'll do that. See what they have. Thanks. Welcome back to Wheelin'. I am Johnny Orange, and we're talking today about 8-lug axles with myself and Keith.
Yeah, John. And just before we went to break, we were mentioning that we were going to talk a little bit about the Sterling axle, and we're probably jamming a lot of information into this, but we're just trying to kind of hit on some of the options out there for you. And I would definitely recommend some of the online resources that I'll mention later in the episode, and I'll try to put in the show notes on this episode. But so the Sterling rear axle for Ford came out in the mid-'80s. And that was their own design that essentially replaced the Dana. They still use Dana axles in certain applications all the way up to today, but Ford started building their own rear axle that you'd find like the F-250, F-350 trucks. And the first design that they had was the 10 1/4 rear end, and that did have the standard 8 by 6.5 lug pattern that was common all these years. Where they changed things up was they eventually went to a 10.5-inch ring gear, and then for the 99 model year, with the Super Duty chassis, they switched the lug pattern to specifically be the 8 on 170 lug pattern. It's a metric lug pattern. It is very, very close to the standard lug pattern, but the wheels will not fit. So if you're going to run a Sterling rear end out of a Super Duty truck that's 99 or newer, you need to make sure that you're also running a Super Duty front, unless you're going to be running wheel spacers, adapters, or wheel adapters, or taking two different spares with you because you're going to have two different wheel lug patterns.
Makes sense.
So, and the Sterling axle has, the earlier axles tend to have some pinion problems. The later axles in the Super Duties are very, very strong. So, there's really no such thing as a lemon 8-lug full floater rear axle. They're all pretty good axles, and so that's why we're just kind of breezing through them. We wanted to really get onto the front axles here in a second, but the rear axles, that kind of gives you the options of what the commonly available ones out there are. And it's also, we should mention that these 8-lug rear axles that we are talking about primarily are going to be found in 3/4 and 1-ton American-built pickup trucks. You will also find them in vans. A lot of times in vans, you're looking at something that's 4 to 5 inches wider. And if you're looking at a dually vehicle for a rear axle, the drums and the brakes are going to be significantly different. And so you're looking at a lot of heavy equipment there. So unless you really need a dually rear axle, or you really need the width for some reason, because they are typically wider with some exceptions, you're going to be looking at something that only has single wheels in the rear.
So that being said, if we're swapping a custom axle, could I put a dually in the back of my Wrangler? Because that'd be sweet.
Oh my gosh. You're going to be one of those guys that they put on, like Instagram, and they're just going to tag, hashtag redneck fabrication or something.
I will not be a California rake vehicle, though. I won't do that.
You don't want to do that, huh?
No. Dually? Okay.
Okay, all right. So the California rake up there, everyone, is where it's really high in the front and it's really low in the rear. And it's a style that's popular in some areas, but I'm not a fan in the trucks.
No, it just looks like you have a bad spring or something.
Yeah, it looks like you can only afford a lift kit in the front. That's what I always think when I see them. Okay, so, like we were saying, these rear axles are, unless you're talking about something that's only a couple years old, these are cheap axles. You can get them out of all those American-built trucks, swap them into whatever you're building, and a couple of $100 for the the base price, you're golden. But what everybody always wants to talk about with 8 lugs, and the reason that everybody wants to go to 8 lugs usually, is the front axles. Now, the front axles, you've got not a lot of options, but there are only a couple of really good options for those. So Dana really has the market cornered on the 8-lug front axles. Pretty much everything you're going to see out there that's an 8-lug solid axle. We've talked about solid versus IFS in the past. A solid axle is a solid beam that goes from your left wheel to the right wheel in the front of your vehicle. It's not an independent suspension. So we're talking about solid 8-lug front axles here. The solid 8-lug front axle came out just like the rear axles in about the 1950s with the NAPCO conversions and some of the Coleman conversions. But the 8-lug axles that are worth buying to swap into your rig today are not going to be the old things, because the technology on the old axles was what they called a closed knuckle. It was a ball and socket design, and you couldn't see the U-joint. So the easiest way to tell the difference between a closed knuckle and an open knuckle axle, and we're only going to mention the closed knuckle briefly here because there's really not a lot of great options in an 8-lug. There's really no good options in an 8-lug closed knuckle axle. They're obsolete. Parts are hard to get a hold of them. If you look under the vehicle and you're looking at the point where the wheel, the knuckle turns, so where your ball joints or your kingpins are, and we'll talk about that in a minute, where it turns, if you can see that axle shaft in the front with the U-joint in it and you can physically see the U-joint, it's an open knuckle axle. If you look under there and there's a big ball with a seal around it, that's called a closed knuckle axle. Now, the Japanese are still running closed knuckle axles in some of their vehicles overseas. But the Americans pretty much abandoned the closed knuckle design by about 1977 or so. So we're only going to talk about the open knuckle axles here. So the open knuckle axle options that are readily available in junkyards and in backyards and things like that are going to be your Dana 44 front and your GM 10 bolt front, which is a GM copy of the Dana 44. Very similar axle. Those are found in GM trucks starting in the late 70s, going up to about 1991, depending on which body style you're looking at. And those are the weakest of the 8-lug axles out there. They're not bad axles, but these are not the ones that you're talking about running around on, say, big 44-inch boggers and stuff like that. These were meant to be a sometimes used front axle. They weren't meant to be very, very strong. The fact that they have 8 lugs out on the outside does not make them any stronger. They're still as strong as a half-ton axle. And the only difference really with the Dana 44 and the 10 bolt is you are looking at a axle that is essentially a half-ton axle, but it has 3/4 ton size brakes on it. So you do get a brake upgrade with it, but that's all you're getting. You're not getting a stronger axle that's less likely to break. And that would be one of the things we should say, why 8-lug axles? Guys,
That was the question I have. You're talking tire size here a little bit in relation to moving up to 8 lugs. What would determine that? I'm running 33s on my Jeep right now. I mean, I don't think I need to go to 8 lugs for that. Maybe what tire size would I want to consider that at? Maybe.
Okay, so there's a lot of thought on that out there, and the reason that the 8-lug axles that you purchase to swap under your rig are stronger is going to be the axle shaft size and the ring and pinion size. So when you go to these larger axles, you get a larger ring and pinion, so therefore stronger, more surface area, and your axle shafts get larger. So you go up from, say, about an inch, 1.2 inches, 30 spline axle shaft up to an inch and a half, 35 spline axle shaft in most applications. Not always, but that's about the most common out there. That allows you to put a lot more horsepower, larger tire size, with less chance of breakage. Kind of the belief today is 37-inch tires and above is where you're looking at your 8-lug axles.
So I'm good for a little bit.
You are, but that doesn't mean you can't run 37 to 40-inch tires on a smaller axle. In a lighter rig like a Jeep, sometimes that's fine. The Rubicons, people are putting 40s on the 40 Dana 44s, and they're doing just fine. Hardcore heavy wheeling, the 1-ton axle is going to be a better option. The drawbacks is now you have a lot more weight to the vehicle because you've taken a truck axle and put it in a lightweight vehicle, although the weight's down low. But you've also now everything's a heavier rotating mass, and you now have these axles that, like with the GM 14 bolt, hang down further. So your ground clearance does suffer. So that's one of the reasons you don't want to go to the bigger axles until you have the bigger tires.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so does that answer your question for that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so for the front axles, we talked about the Dana 44 and the 10 bolt. Now, the Dana 44 has been available in the front of Ford, Chevy, and Dodge. Those are going to always be in if you're looking at Dana 44 with an 8-lug, that's going to be in a 3/4 ton. So that means F250, 2500 series GM, or a 200 series Dodge. So, any of those is going to be a Dana 44. Now, Where this gets a little bit tricky is some of the heavier duty 3/4 tons started to get the larger axles. And that's where we're talking about the Dana 60 front axle, which is really the kind of the industry standard for the top of the mountain, the strongest front axle that is readily available. That really is. There have been custom built Dana 70s, Dana 80s, other things like that. But if you're looking for a factory style front axle, you're going to be looking at a Dana 60 front. There's a lot of misinformation though out there that people think that the Dana 60, just because it's a Dana 60, makes it a good axle, and that's not the case.
That's what I always thought. I guess I'm wrong.
Well, see, and like I said, there's a lot of misinformation. So we're talking about the open knuckle ones. So starting there, after you go to the open knuckle, you have two designs for your front axle. You've got front axles that then have, the earlier ones were all what was called kingpin. A kingpin axle is fully mechanical in the front, and it has caps on the top and bottom that are fully serviceable. The easiest way to take and identify a Dana 60 kingpin axle is the top of the spot where the whole wheel assembly and knuckle assembly turns for your steering. The part where it actually, if you draw a line, an invisible line in your mind where this turns up and down, or not up and down, but right and left, the top and the bottom is going to be held on by 4 bolts on a kingpin.
Makes sense.
You're going to have a 4-bolt cap on the top. You're going to have a 4-bolt cap on the bottom.
That's different than a ball joint setup, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So ball joints are pressed into the housing, and you're just going to see kind of a big round top on the top and bottom.
Yep, those I'm familiar with what I'm running.
Okay. A lot of people are going to argue that the kingpin axle is stronger. I really don't see that argument. I used to believe that myself. The biggest advantage of a kingpin axle is that 4-bolt plate on the top allows a really easy spot to bolt high steer arms onto it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so if you're going to do like a high steer, you're going to like really get up, try to get it so your steering isn't bashing into rocks and things like that. The kingpin axle is one of the cheaper ways of doing it. So all of the big three, GM, Ford, Dodge, ran kingpins up until the early 90s. And then they started switching over to ball joints. Specifically, Dodge switched over to ball joints in 94. Ford switched over in 92. GM actually didn't run a ball joint Dana 60. GM went to independent front suspension.
Bummer.
Yeah, they dropped it out. So that's what happened with those. Now, people are saying, okay, well, I'm looking online. I'm looking, Facebook Marketplace. I'm looking on Craigslist, and I see Dana 60 axles, and guys are asking $1,000 for them. Maybe a decent deal, maybe a complete ripoff. The ones you're going to be looking for are your kingpin axles, and you're also going to be not looking for certain ball joint ones. So there's really no bad kingpin axle. There are some that are maybe a little bit less desirable, but the kingpin axles are all pretty much equally strong, with only some very minor exceptions there. The ball joint axles, the one that you don't want to get is the 94 to 02 Dodge front axle. That is got a vacuum disconnect like the earlier Jeeps.
Oh, yeah.
It's only 30 spline axle shafts. It's essentially worth scrap weight. There's really nothing good about it. So
That's a bummer. I bet those ones are easy to find, too.
yeah, there's lots of them. Well, that's why I see, people are like, oh, well, I want $800 for this axle. And it's like, yeah, I'm not even going to give you $50 for it. So, and I think after the next break, we're going to talk about some of the secrets how to find these. So I want to just kind of finish up here the kind of the identity, because we're probably jamming. Man, I think we're jamming way too much information into this episode.
Maybe a little bit. We probably could have split it up into a couple, front versus rear, but we'll roll with it.
We'll roll with it, exactly.
No pun intended.
Yeah. So with your front axles, if you're shopping for a front axle for your vehicle, the number one thing that you need to know before you start getting picky about whether it's got ball joints or kingpins or any of that stuff is driver versus passenger drop. You'll hear those terms all the time. Do I have a driver's drop front axle or a passenger drop front axle? And what that means is with a driver drop front axle, the front drive shaft attaches at the driver's side, or commonly the left side of the vehicle. A passenger drop axle, your transfer case has the drive shaft go up to the right side of the vehicle. So you need to know that. If you've got a Ford, putting a Chevy front axle in it is not going to be easy because now your transfer case orientation is not right. So most of your modern vehicles today are all driver drop, but popular vehicles in the 70s, 60s, things like that were mostly passenger drop.
Okay.
And so this is where you have to make sure what you're looking for. So if you've got, say, a TJ Jeep, and you have a TJ Jeep is going to have a driver drop front axle.
Oh, yeah.
Your only option for a driver drop kingpin, or not kingpin, or driver drop Dana 60 front is going to be Ford. Ford is the only one that ever put a driver drop front axle of any worth. Dodge, later one's the one we talked about with the junk vacuum disc intact, that was also a driver drop axle. But any of your decent driver drop front axles are going to be a Ford axle. So going all the way back into the late 70s to the Super Duties of today, they're all pretty darn good axles. And so you're going to be looking at Ford. If you need a passenger drop axle, you're going to be looking for something from a GM truck from 77 to 91 or a Dodge truck from about 77 to 93. So that's what you're going to be looking for. And I think I don't want to try to jam into this episode too much. I don't want to get into hub choices and all that because there are some differences there. External spline versus, internal spline and things like that. But there are a couple of axles that are really at the top of the pile for the best junkyard and Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace picks. And I think after the break, I want to talk about those and how to get the best deal on those. Does that sound good to you, John?
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do that. Let's take a break, and we'll talk about those when we come back.
See you in a bit.
Have you heard the good news? Now there's a local paper that people just can't seem to get enough of. It's the Thumbprint News. The Thumbprint News is free and full of interesting stories that focus on what's important in our lives. Stories that touch on this area's rich history, unique places, and the diverse cultures and people. You'll be in the know when you read the Thumbprint News. Go to thumbprintnews.com and read the paper online for free today.
All right, and we are back. John, you said you had a couple of questions for me here.
Yes, I've looked up or tried to look up some of these axles before, and as we've made apparent, I have a Jeep Wrangler, the TJ, so I have the coil spring suspension. So were there ever any of these axles that had coil springs?
Okay, great question, John. Back in the old days, no, but now one of the best options out there, and they're starting to get a little bit cheaper only because of the number of them out there available, is the Ford Super Duty front axle. So for coil springs, Ford had leaf springs up until the 2004 model year.
Oh, wow.
For the 2005 model year, they switched over to a coil spring front and with a Dana 60. Radius arm design and coil spring front. The Dodge one that was junk that we were talking about, that was also a 4-link coil spring design, but you wouldn't want to mess with that one.
Yeah.
But for a decent swap-in axle, a Super Duty Dana 60 is a high pinion design, which, quick note on that, high pinion versus low pinion. The Fords are the only ones that are high pinion. High pinion means that the input of the axle sits higher than the center line of the axle. If you don't know what that is, Google it, folks. High pinion versus low pinion. We can probably talk a lot about that, the pros and cons, in another future episode. But so a Ford high pinion axle, 2005 to today, is a great swapping axle. Coil spring. It's not a direct bolt-in for your Jeep, but with a couple of brackets welded up, it's a great option. Of course, at that point, you're at the metric 8x170 wheel pattern. So you're going to also probably want to run a Sterling rear unless you're re-drilling one of the hubs front or rear to go to a standard pattern.
I'm cheap. I'll re-drill it.
There you go.
Rephrase that, I'm budget-minded.
Exactly. And speaking of spring styles, pretty much all of the other Dana 60 front axles that are worth talking about anything are all going to be the 32-inch spring perch width. So that's the measurement between the springs on the frame and the front. But I know you had asked me before if there's anything different. Ford, starting in 1980, went to a 36-inch spring perch width. So The holy grail axle out there for many people is the 78 and 79 Ford front axle, because it's a driver drop high pinion, so it goes in a lot of the newer Jeeps and newer Chevys and things like that. And it's only a 32-inch spring perch width. So the differential sits a little bit closer towards the center of the vehicle, and it's a very modular axle to be able to swap into. They're getting harder to find. That's the $1,000 one out there. That's the one that it's really hard to find one of those for under $1,000.
I believe it.
And on that note, the question, like I had said earlier, is how do you get a good deal on these? Craigslist, Facebook, things like that. Buying the axle by itself, you're always going to spend a little bit more money because most people know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you can go to your pull-apart yards where they have a set price, $200 for an axle assembly, and you get lucky and you find something good. But the best way to do it that I've found is, of course, looking around your hometown and looking on Craigslist for buying a whole vehicle. If you can drag the whole vehicle home, whether it's running or not, and you can get a non-running pickup truck, $300, $400, $500, and you pull out the axle that's in it, and then you scrap the rest or part out the rest, you end up with a free axle a lot of times. So that's the thin line off-road secret on this thing.
That's what I did to get the engine for my Jeep. Bought the whole car. That had a lot of odds and ends I needed for it, but it worked out. Like you said, buy the whole thing's cheaper than buy just the engine.
Sure, exactly. I remember you doing that, dragging home different carcasses of Jeeps to get everything you needed for your...
that was the other one, but I stole a lot of those parts for this one.
Hell, that works.
Yeah.
So what are the ones you want to look for? What are the Craigslist hit words and things like that? If you're looking for a high pinion Ford axle, so driver drop axle, you're looking for those really, to put in your Jeep, to put in your modern Jeep, or to put in your GM truck, or maybe even to swap into a Dodge with the driver drop front axle, so 94 or newer, you're going to be looking for a Ford F350. They didn't use the Dana 60 in any of the newer trucks until the F250, the Super Duties do. So you're going to be looking at 3/4 and 1 tons, but through the 80s and early 90s, the 3/4 ton Fords were IFS. So you're going to be looking for an F350, or if you're looking for the Super Duty axle, you're going to be looking for an F250 or 350. So that's pretty much the key there. So, you go on to Craigslist and you say F350 4x4. You start looking at the rusty ones and whatnot. You say, okay, here's one that, the frame's broken on and I can pick it up for $500. As long as you do a little bit of research and you make sure that it's the Dana 60 front and it's the style that you want, grab it. Pull the axle out, sell off the rest, scrap the rest.
Makes sense.
Same goes for the Dodge and the Ford trucks. Or I'm sorry, the Dodge and the Chevy trucks. Chevy never used a Dana 60 in a 3/4 ton. They only used the Dana 60 in the 1 ton. So for those, you're going to be looking for a K30 or a 1 ton 4x4. So you'll be looking for one of those. That's going to be a kingpin front. They didn't use a ball joint in the Chevys at all, with exception of that Kodiak van-based truck thing they use, which is a medium duty. But we're talking about 1 ton trucks here. So you're going to be looking for one of those. You're going to be looking at a 91 or older 1 ton Chevy truck. That's a good way to get it. For the Dodges, you're going to be looking for mainly for an 85 to 92, or 93. You're going to be ending up with a ball joint. I'm sorry, a kingpin. The kingpin ball joint thing. I'm going back and forth in my mind today. You're going to be getting a kingpin passenger drop low pinion axle. Good axles. The older Dodge stuff is good as well, but it uses a different hub design. So that's pretty much it on which ones to look for. Do you got any questions on how to find, the specific axle, or in your mind, what axle is going to be best for a project that you're working on, maybe?
In general, I've always figured Dana 60. As far as picking a specific one, like you said, the driver drop versus passenger drop, I know might affect transfer case.
Yeah.
If I'd have to change that out. So it's just a matter of how in-depth do I want to get with this. I mean, at what point do you get to where it's, overkill on some of this stuff?
Well, exactly. If you want to go with those big tires and you want to, you're going to do rock bouncing, you're going to do something like that, then you're going to want to look at a Dana 60. But if you're looking for a daily driver that, you're only going to run 33s, 35s on, something like that, Dana 44, even a Dana 30 front is going to be absolutely fine.
That works.
So
I don't need any Dana 70s or Dana 80s in my little Wrangler.
yeah, exactly.
Not yet.
I do want to give people an option out there if you're looking for information about the Dana axles and all the different things that is in them. A great resource, and I'm going to try to remember to put this into the show notes, but this is really the deciding source for information on 8-lug axles. It's billavista.com, so that's BILLAVISTA.com. And then if you go on there, they've got tech archives and all sorts of great information, not just axles. They have information on all sorts of other things, but they have their Dana Bibles on there, they call them. And the Dana 60 Bible, Dana 70 Bible. You can go on there and you can just read to your heart's content and you can find out all sorts of great information. So that's a great resource online. People on like Pirate 4x4 have been quoting Bella Vista for 20 years.
So I know I've seen it before. Couldn't quite remember where.
Exactly. That's pretty much the place to go. There's lots of other places to go online that have Dana 60 Tech and things, but Bella Vista is going to be a great resource for people to go to.
Sweet.
John, we jammed too much in this episode. I can tell that, but
we probably should have split it.
That's all right. But this is an episode where we were trying to touch on, some options that are out there. If you're an avid wheeler and you've been doing this for 20 years, you already know what we were talking about here. This is an episode that's great for newbies, but it's also great for people that are thinking, oh, well, wait a minute, what are my options? Maybe there's some confusion out there. So, like I said, if you're looking for even more in-depth information, Bella Vista is a great resource. We're getting to the point now where we mentioned we are going to do a trivia question.
Almost forgot about that.
Exactly. So, what are we going to do for the trivia question? What are we going to give away, John?
Well, we mentioned earlier we're going to give away a Thin Line Off-Road shirt. Their choice of the color on the stripe and the size.
That's right. We did mention that. Yep.
And one of the new wheeling stickers, the decals that we had done up.
Absolutely. And so what are they going to need to do once we give them this question here? What are they going to need to do?
Well, once this video once this podcast uploads, we are going to put a link to the episode on the Facebook page. On the 4x4 Talk.
Well, actually both. Yeah, on 4x4
we'll
Talk and on the Facebook page. There'll be a link on both.
And then what they're going to have to do is comment their answer and then share the post to be eligible to win that.
Yeah, now we're going to want them to comment in the 4x4 Talk group.
Okay.
So they're going to have to join the 4x4 group, the 4x4 Talk group on Facebook, and you're going to need to comment with the answer. We're not going to post the question. It's going to be in this podcast only. I'm going to say it here in a minute or so. So you need to go ahead and put your answer on the link in the 4x4 Talk group, and we also need you to share episode 8 on your personal Facebook page. We're gonna rotate around to different social medias. So sometimes it might be a Twitter challenge or an Instagram challenge, something like that. But this time it's going to be a Facebook one. So we need you to join the 4x4 Talk Facebook group, and we need you to comment on the post and share episode 8. And the first person, so this is not even a random thing, the very first person who gets this trivia question right is going to win the t-shirt and the decal. Now, what we're going to do is if somebody doesn't get this by the time we record probably episode 10, these winning items are going to go into a box, and we're just going to keep building up the prize pool. So, hopefully somebody gets this. So are you ready for this one, John?
I am.
Okay. So we covered a lot of stuff. We gave away a lot of information about 8-lug axles. There is one oddball 8-lug axle out there that is a factory application. So the answer to this question is not something out of an industrial piece of equipment or an oddball one-off or something that was found in a van or a motorhome. This is a factory application. There was only a 1 to 2 year span. So we're actually going to take 2 correct answers on the year on this, but we need the year and the model and make of the vehicle that had a low pinion, driver's drop, open knuckle, kingpin front axle. So once again, that is a kingpin 8-lug front axle. It's open knuckle, so it's the modern open knuckle design, but it's a low pinion driver drop. There was only about a 14-month period in which that was an option available in a truck. We need the year, make, and model of that truck. So you're going to want to go to the 4x4 Talk Facebook page. You're going to want to say the year, make, and model of that truck. First person to get that right on there is going to win our T-shirt and our logo.
Sounds good.
So, John, what else do we need to cover today?
I thought we grabbed just about everything here.
Got any more questions about axles or anything?
Nothing I can think of off the top of my head. I'm definitely going to be giving that Bella Vista website once over, twice over, and get some more knowledge on that stuff. For sure.
So we're gonna try to start we're gonna start plugging some of that in our show notes too, so people can take a look at that. And speaking of our social media, like I said earlier, we are on Twitter now. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. We're not on Instagram yet, but that'll be coming shortly, I'm sure. So go to our...
What was that Twitter handle again?
Twitter handle is @Wheelin Radio. So WHEELIN, no G, just Wheelin Radio.
Cool.
@Wheelin Radio. Or if you just put in Wheelin, you should find us on Twitter, but if you put @Wheelin Radio on there. And, if you see something super cool in the Twitterverse out there, some cool truck or 4x4, tag us. Say, hey, @Wheelin Radio, see this. The 4x4 Talk Facebook group. Maybe that's how we should actually end this one today. I'm going to open up my computer right now, and let's go to the 4x4 Talk Facebook group, and let's do a couple of shout-outs to some of our early members. What do you think about that idea, John?
That works. You've got the computer. I can't quite see it from here.
Oh, I didn't even notice you didn't bring yours today. You got your big book there, but you didn't bring your computer.
I brought my notes. It was giving me some problems. I got mad at it, so I turned it off and left it at home.
All right, so I am opening up on Facebook our 4x4 Talk group, so that's 4x4 Talk. And we had put a couple of posts up there, and we had put up, one of our first posts up was that we said, post up your favorite old wheelin' pick, let's say over 10 years ago, if you've been doing this that long. We've got 31 comments on that already. And let's see, so we're going to do a couple of, we're not going to do them all, but we're going to do a couple of shout-outs here. The first one that was not me was a Mr. Daniel Blair. He's an old wheeling buddy of mine. I've wheeled with Daniel a number of times. So, hey, Dan, how's it going? Mr. Tony Villardo has commented a couple of times on there, and Tony is actually one of our mods on the page as well. He has a vested interest in seeing wheeling and the museum prosper, and so he is going to be on there too. So if you ever have an issue on the page, really not a lot of page rules or anything. It's post up stuff about 4x4s. Steve Mann, you got some awesome wheeling picks. You got your TJ Jeep in mud. James Robbins, your Toyota and through the ice. That's crazy. John Murphy, we're looking at a CJ on the side. Oh man, that's crazy. Going down here. So there's some cool pictures there. And up on one of our other posts, we said, post up some pics of your current projects or rigs. We have 43 comments as of this recording on there. And taking a look, and let's see here. It's not opening the way it should for me. Oh, there we go. I got it. We got some awesome rock buggies. A lot of rock buggies in there. I see Tony's in there again. We got Douglas Riva. You got an awesome Toyota and a Ranger in there. Zach Smith, you've got a cool looking, it looks like a CJ7 based tube buggy. That is really cool. You didn't say what it's based off of, but I think that's what it is. It's a Jeep tube buggy. John Murphy, you've got a awesome, looks like Chevy Tracker with the whole back's been tubed out. Now, I'd like to do that to my fiance's Tracker. Heck yeah. I don't think she's going to want me to do that, but So there's some
Ignoring us
names
from across the room. I
So, and we're doing this because we want to interact with you folks. We're going to interact with you on the page and whatnot. So, there we are. That is the 4x4 Talk page. Get on there, check it out, and you will see as soon as this episode gets uploaded, a spot for you to put your trivia answer in there, and then we will message you through Facebook to get your information to ship the winning person as soon as we have the winning answer on there.
And as always, don't forget, if you want to hear us talk about anything specific, feel free to get a hold of us, and we'll ask your question, or we'll do a whole special on it.
Absolutely. Well, John, why don't you do your sign-off like we've been doing?
Sounds good. Thank everybody for listening, and have a good one, everybody.